What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye. We're in Los Angeles. Nick Foles did it again. The Eagles beat the Rams 30-23. This is not the way I thought this was going to go. I was pretty open about that. I said to somebody after the game, this felt the most like they did. This felt more like last year's team than any other game this season.
What did I tell you? What did I tell you, Zach? Not that I was being optimistic, but I've seen Nick Foles do this before. I've seen this movie. And like you said, this did really feel like last year's bunch. Really, from the opening drive on. Nick Foles was fantastic in the first half. Led three scoring drives in the third quarter, too.
He was 10 of 10 that quarter, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a situation where you were fearing the worst, hoping for the best, and you got almost the best. I mean, really, this couldn't have played out better for the Eagles unless maybe they would have, blown the Rams out. Sean McVay's considered one of the best offensive minds in the game. He's the guy that everybody wants a duplicate of for their team as a head coach. This young, awesome offensive guy. Jim Schwartz, beaten him twice.
Yeah.
Not once, twice. Outcoached him once, twice. So I think there's a lot that you could take away from this. The Eagles have a little bit over 30% chance of making the playoffs. Just when you think they're done, bam.
Man, and it's like Nick Foles, he obviously wasn't perfect, but he just did the things that you expect out of him. And there's just so many Nick Foles moments. I called it. He had the Nick Foles throw ever. I think it was in the third quarter where he was about to get just hit. I think it was Aaron Donald.
Yeah, Aaron
I believe
Donald.
it was Sue. He said it in the press conference. It was Sue. He's like, somebody asked him what he saw, and he's like, I saw the Ndamukong Sue coming at me. So he threw it up in the air, and it was the weirdest. I've never seen a play like that where two guys had to come back to the ball. They were both wide open, and Alshon came down with it. It was like a basketball play. I mean, it was a turning point, almost, honestly. It was a 50-yard gain. I believe they scored at the end of that drive, Wendell Smallwood. But it's just every time you count him out, the only reason he had given that he could do this is that he's done something similar before, but based on the evidence of this season, there was no reason to think that they would come out and beat a team that has been one of the best teams in the NFL this year, and they just outplayed them in pretty much all facets.
I mean, when you look at Nick Foles' stats,
they don't jump off the page.
They don't jump off the page, but you think about it, they had some really early down runs for touchdowns. Wendell Smallwood, like you said, had two really powerful runs, and then Josh Adams had his. And I think, with Nick, and I'll probably get blasted for this, I think with Nick, when he's able to take the chances that he does, he lofts a lot of passes downfield. It's really good for Alshon Jeffery. But it's also really good for the running game because you have to be wary of, hey, Nick's going to throw some ducks downfield, but he's got the type of receivers that can make plays on those types of balls. And you have to respect that. And I think that freed up the running game a little bit. I mean, what stood out to you most about Nick Foles' performance tonight?
I mean, he was running the offense. There was definitely, he brought, whether it was because he was in there or they got up for this game and there was a lot of fans in the crowd, but the offense just felt like it had a boost of energy. They were just flowing, they were moving. I don't know, man. It just it looked like they did last year. That's just, I know maybe it's just Nick Foles' presence because he didn't have any the amazing Super Bowl level throws that he had necessarily, but he didn't really make many mistakes. There were some bad throws, but they were bad in a way that they weren't going to get picked off kind of thing. There was some bad screen passes. There was one that almost got picked off that would have been costly, but it didn't. That's just right. Nick Foles has the best luck in the world. That's just the reality. There's something about him. He has good juju. But I don't know. It's just something about the way he just galvanized this team. You could just feel it, and the guys kind of half admitted it after the game. They're we had energy that we needed. He brought a swagger that we needed. I don't think they were necessarily taking a shot at Carson. But, this looked like the offense that we've been waiting for them to have, and it was right out of the gate because scoring on the first drive, even if it was only a field goal, that was a big step for them. Yeah,
they scored on 3 of their first 4 drives, too. They only had 4 drives in the first half, and they scored on 3 of them. That's pretty good, You ask for that type of stuff, and I think you look at Fletcher Cox had to leave the game. Josh Adams left the game
twice. Yeah,
and so they were still able to, excuse me, they were still able to kind of just keep going. I mean, this team has proven to be resilient. I mean, it's 7-7 when you look at the injuries they have. It's kind of impressive. I mean, the season hasn't been what you've wanted it to be, but they've kept fighting. We've never sensed any bit of quit from this team. You read about other teams where guys are joking around in the locker room after a loss or doing anything. That's not the Eagles. That's not them. So I think that's something to take away. This team's not done. They're going to have a very tough road ahead because they still need to beat
They need stuff to happen.
Yeah, they need stuff to happen. It's not all in their control.
Yeah.
They're going to control the controllables. That's what they want to do. But, the reality
really,
is...
the idea of a team controlling their own destiny, they kind of don't. I mean, every team does.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, it's kind of out of their... I mean, they can't lose the last 2 games. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But let's talk about a couple plays. We already talked about a couple plays, but defense, they forced a few turnovers that probably was the difference in the game. And the defense was pretty stellar the entire game. They kind of wore down a little bit towards the end, but they helped. I mean, that last drive, they stopped Goff. They kept them in bounds. It was picture perfect. I mean, they got pretty close, and they defended that last play really well. I don't think Goff was ready for what Jim Schwartz threw at him. Fletcher Cox was pretty dominant, even though he came out of the game and was injured. But the one Jared Goff turnover in particular was so bad.
Yeah, with Camus.
He was getting hit by Camus.
Yeah.
Well, first he tripped on the offensive lineman. He was he started getting hit by Camus, and for some reason he thought it would be a good idea to try and throw it still. I don't know where he was trying to throw it or what the thought process was there, and it went right into Corey Graham's hands. Right, Corey Graham, right?
Yep.
So that's 2 straight weeks with interceptions for that guy. And, just the timing of that. When was that one exactly? I'll look that up. But, the defense's
They have
tonight,
8 turnovers in the last
most of them have come in the last 4 games, yeah.
So, that's something to take away from all of this. I think, turnovers come in bunches. I'm going to save this more for my positional thing, but Avonte Maddox deserves a ton of credit. I mean, he's played nickel. He's played free safety.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He was a standout on special teams as a gunner, and now he's playing outside, and I don't remember if he even allowed a catch. He might have allowed one. I mean, our press box seats were right in front of,
not a great view.
You couldn't see the 25 to 35, so maybe he allowed a small screen. But he had a phenomenal night. I thought Rasul Douglas tackled well. He had the one give up, the big gain to the 1 yard line that eventually led to a touchdown. They handled Todd Gurley pretty well in this game. Overall, I thought the defense played very, very well. I thought Jim Schwartz coached a very good game.
All right, let's jump into positions now.
Let's do it.
We talked a little bit about Wentz. We can elaborate on him a little bit now, just specifically performance. That Alshon throw, he just heaved it up, and it was risky. He didn't. If he had thrown it farther, it would have been a touchdown. But he had a dude bearing down on him. But he kept his poise, which is the most impressive part about his performance, honestly.
Yeah, I think Nick did what he needed to do, right? And with Nick, you don't expect that Super Bowl performance every single game. It's just too much. He actually played, for a guy that's high variance, I thought he played pretty just above average.
I would say so. He finished 24 of 31, 270 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick. It's kind of a misnomer because 2 of the drives he got them all the way down to within the 10, and then Wendell Smallwood punched it in. So he deserves credit for that. It's not really a 0 touchdown, 1 interception night. I think it was just
6 scoring drives.
Yeah, he only had 7 incompletions. The 1 interception, he had 1 that probably should have been an interception, and he had a couple bad screen passes. But other than that, he was pretty much on the money. He had a good play. One of his first throws was a Dallas Goedert. It was down the sideline. It was really good, and that kind of got him into a groove. He's always been a guy that he needs to get into a groove, and he didn't get into a groove those first 2 games. Then he was pulled out, and this week he came out. He had a pretty good game, and we don't know what the status is of Carson Wentz for next week. If I'm guessing right now, I would say Nick Foles probably starts, and I think he's probably going into that game with more confidence than he had going into this one.
Yeah, we brought it up on the preview show that I thought that this was going to be a big game for Alshon because I just felt like Nick's strengths fit his strengths. They're both basketball players at heart. Nick's very good at lobbing passes and allowing his bigger receivers to go up and get him. Carson's more of like a fastball thrower. He's, more direct. He wants to get the ball there as quickly as possible. Really hasn't taken a ton of shots downfield. So I thought that Nick could be that guy. And you saw Nick struggle when he didn't have Alshon in those first 2 games. And I think, again, Nelson Aguilar was kind of an afterthought. But I thought Alshon kind of, they used Golden Tate relatively well in spots. But again, this game was about Alshon.
Yeah.
To me.
Let's do receivers now because 8 of 8. 8 catches, 8 targets, 160 yards.
He told me 2 weeks ago he has the best hands in the league. Today he looked like he had the best hands in the league. I mean, the guy was pulling balls out of the air, out of nowhere. He is a guy that's not going to bring you a lot of speed and yards after the catch, but they used him so well in this game. They used him on a screen where he had to use basically his strength and power and run over dudes. He's a guy that if you have him go up and get it in like a 50-50 ball, the only other guy that I would trust more is maybe Julio Jones, maybe AJ Green, but like those 3 guys, I think that's Jeffrey's big strength, and I think Jeffrey's poised for. I don't mean to look too far ahead, but those Texans corners are very small, and they're not. They are very light because they like them that way, and Alshon could eat for the rest of the season if we're.
Just look at the last 3 games he's played with Nick Foles: NFC Championship, the Super Bowl, and this game. Like that's
the 3 biggest games.
Those are 3 of the best receiver performances in like team history. Like,
but like you look at it, but like if we're looking at it even objectively, those are the 3 most important games of his career, and he delivered. Right, Alshon. There's this misnomer that Alshon's not like that. I don't want to say that people think that he's not a big part of the offense. But like that he's not a number 1 receiver. But every single time his number's called in a big game, the dude steps
comes up. Yeah.
Somebody I do want to talk about that I think is the reason partially why they won this game. Sheldon Gibson. Came in, had a wrist injury. I'm being facetious.
I was like, where's he going with this?
I didn't even know.
I mean, you pointed out, I didn't even think about Aguilar, but I thought he was going to be pretty involved, and he wasn't. Tate, it seemed like, got more of the looks in the slot.
He did.
5 catches, 5 targets, 43 yards.
And I thought they used him really well. Before, when they were forcing him to do all these screens and stuff, here they allowed him to run a route, and then he got a short route and get some yardage after it. He was very tough. There was that one, it was 3rd and 12, and they got it to him, and they ended up punting because they only got 11 yards off of it, but I thought he ran the route really well. I thought him and Nick looked like they had some cohesion. Look, this wide receiver group is talented. It's just like they haven't been, some of the guys haven't been used right, some of the chemistry's been off. Nick gives them kind of a fresh start. We'll see where they go from here.
Yeah, tight end, it was one of Zack Ertz's lesser games, 3 catches. 7 targets, 22 yards. The interception came because Wentz was trying to... Not Wentz. See, Wentz was trying to force...
Second time you done it. I wasn't going to correct you. Till you
Did I do that before?
Yeah, you said... Yeah, we talked about... whatever. They heard it. You can go
Foles,
back.
But Foles tried forcing it into him. They were in the red zone. It came after they had one of their turnovers.
He just didn't... He didn't see
it was a bad throw. I think it only turned into a field goal, so it didn't come back to bite them as much as it could have.
So here's what I would say about that. I don't think it was a bad throw. It was a bad decision.
Yeah, okay.
Like, he could have gotten, like, that was perfect on the ball to Ertz. He just had his route jumped because he didn't see that there was underneath coverage. Look, Aqib Talib's a really good corner.
Didn't have a great game.
Did not have a great game when he was covering up.
On that play, he was good, yeah.
Yeah, so he was able to get that pick. Yeah, it didn't come back to bite him that much. Dallas Goedert had the beautiful catch early on.
Didn't get targeted much later, but I think the offense was kind of going in the direction of Alshon the rest of the way. And they're running the ball quite a bit. Yeah, they actually ran the ball quite a bit. Let's see, 15, 18, 20 times. And we can touch on the running backs now. I mean, Wendell Smallwood was the story of the running back group this time. I mean, he's almost like a punchline now. Like, he starts playing like, oh, I guess Wendell Smallwood's playing again for some reason. And then he had maybe the most important game of his career for sure. 10 carries, 48 yards, the 2 touchdowns. They were both pretty good runs. He broke a tackle on one of them, and that's the thing about this. this was kind of like last year with the running backs. Like if a guy was playing well, they went to the hot hand and they were able to. It would be a different guy almost every game, or it would be two guys every game. This year, they haven't really had that as much, where they can go to three different guys. It had mostly been all Josh Adams, and before that, it was a whole lot of nobody doing a lot of stuff. And Darren Sproles had a 17-yard run early in the game that was pretty big. Mm-hmm. Josh Adams, he had a touchdown, but it wasn't his best game. 15 carries, 28 yards. I don't know how banged up he was. You and I talked about this. They kind of keep trying to force him in as their goal line back, and I don't think that's in his skill set, at least at this point. I would use Darren Sproles in that role personally. He's kind of sneaky good on the goal line because he gets leverage, and if you look at his stats, he's actually really good at that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what's your takeaway for the running backs?
So with Smallwood, I've always kind of thought he's a complimentary piece. Like, when the spotlight's on him, he does not play well.
Yeah, when nobody's expecting him to play well.
When nobody's expecting him to come in, like, there have been games this year where, oh God, Smallwood's coming into the game.
I mean, it started off like they were like, well, why are they giving him the ball again?
Right. Yeah. And, he played well. He averaged 4.8 yards a carry. He did everything they asked him to do. Something that I think needs to be brought up, Darren Sproles is so much better at blitz pickup than any one of these running backs. There were times in this game where he saved Nick Foles' life. Like, really, I mean, it was a very impressive game for Darren Sproles when he wasn't touching the football. And you know what? I'm going to say it again. I was completely wrong. I thought he was kind of an afterthought. He has brought something to this team over the last couple of weeks.
He's been an important part of the offense, yeah.
Right. He's kind of breathed new life into this offense. Now, that said, yes, Josh Adams did not have his best game tonight. But that's going to happen, right?
He's a rookie.
You're going to have these type of games. That said, though, I get the vibe he plays better at home. I know that sounds like really weird, but it seems like he really gets up for home games. I think he could have a big bounce back week next week. But let's talk about the offensive line, because I thought they were phenomenal tonight.
They didn't give up a single sack, 3 quarterback hits. It felt like there were more hits than that because it seemed like Foles was getting hit quite a bit. At least Donald was in his face a lot. That
he's the best player.
Yeah. But yeah, the offensive line. I mean, on the Sproles run, 17-yard run, like everybody was blocking their guys. Steven Wisniewski was down up the field with him. Wiz, he didn't have any bad plays, which we kind of thought he was going to be a weak point in this game because Sayamala was decent this year. At least he was better than Wiz was.
Wiz had a couple of moments where he was thrown to the ground, manhandled, but they didn't affect the pressure of the play.
But Lane Johnson and Jason Peters had pretty good games.
Yeah, Jason Peters, I think this was his best game this season, just based on what I could see when, the portable wasn't blocking my view. Look, Jason Kelce is a guy that we really need to talk about because Jason Kelce is a guy that does not typically do very well against bigger defensive tackles. He faced Ndamukong Suh, he faced Aaron Donald at times in this game, and came out on top. I mean, look, there were some bad QB hits on Nick Foles.
There were.
That said, Nick stood in the pocket. He's a guy that can take that.
He's very good at that. It's kind of like Rocky Balboa-esque.
Right.
Like Rocky, he'll stand in there and take the punches, but he'll land his punches. Like he really is the Rocky of this city right now.
You know what's funny is so I made a joke about this, and it didn't do as well as I thought it would, but I still think it's true.
No way that happened.
Yeah. I said something if somebody asked me should we be worried Nick Foles might leave next year, what he does for this offense and everything. And I just said, well, I think that if this was 1836, I'd be covering a witch trial because Nick's magic. That's what he is. I mean, that. It's just there's something about him. There's a vibe. There's a
when it's prime. He's great in primetime games. I believe he's 9-1 or 10-1 in his last 10 to 11
games. The Oakland and the Atlanta games are the only 2 games that I can really recall where I didn't think he played very well. But there was still the magic. I mean, the Keanu Neal thing with his knee, or with the Raiders, the late interception.
I mean, the magic play this time was throwing it up and Alshon coming down with it somehow.
I mean, he was I'll get one of them.
He literally I mean, I wonder. I don't even know if he saw them down there, honestly, because the way the Sue was coming down on him, he literally was like, okay.
The play looked like it was for Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, they both. I was kind of. Everybody was probably a little bit worried. Are they going to run into each other right now? Because it looked like they were both going for it, and then Alshon. And then Alshon came down with it. I mean, that was an awesome. Alshon's really good, man. But
Speaking of really good, you know who's really good tonight? The defensive line, and not just Fletcher Cox, not just Brandon, not Trevon Hester actually made a huge play in the backfield on Todd Gurley in the second quarter.
Hey, Haloti Ngata had a pass deflection.
Yeah, and he almost had a sack, too. He made Jared Goff throw away the ball. It was in the third quarter. Because I remember specifically yelling, "Oh, Ngata!" I feel like I forgot he existed.
Yeah.
They gave Deshaun Hall some snaps.
Yeah, he was playing quite a bit, especially early on. He was getting the Josh Sweat first half snaps pretty much.
Yeah, patented.
Yeah, patented. But Michael Bennett had 2 more quarterback hits. Fletcher Cox had 2, and he had a pretty big sack.
Chris Long had a pretty big pass breakup that almost went for
he had 2 QB hits. I mean the defensive line they were pretty done. I mean Todd Gurley only had 48 rushing yards.
Man, the Rams franchise must hate Chris Long.
Yeah.
Chris Long, like his entire tenure, like their entire tenure there, they were terrible, and then now every time he plays the Rams just play horribly. But yeah, Chris. There's something to be said about a bunch of like plus 30 dudes at defensive end, which is a position that doesn't necessarily age well. Just kicking some butt, man. They're pressure city.
Michael Bennett is so good, man.
Michael Bennett, it's incredible, man. He's got like the fountain of youth or something. But I thought Brandon Graham did pretty well.
They were just solid, and they were good pretty much through the whole game.
They did well against the run.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They only gave 48 rushing yards to Todd Gurley. Linebackers, I don't know if they necessarily stood out. I mean, Camus made that good play. I mean, it was kind of handed to him. He tripped in front of him, but they didn't do anything egregiously bad either, which is a good thing.
So let me say this about Camus, because I haven't acknowledged it the last couple of games, and by the time it's been relevant, it's just not relevant anymore. But he's really improved as a tackler over the last couple of weeks. He's been in really good spots. He hasn't been an issue, is all I'll say.
Yeah.
And I thought Nigel Bradham played a pretty decent game, and he's kind of had it rough over the last couple of weeks. Nathan Gary had a nice play. They're linebackers or whatever, but the linebackers are so unimportant to this defense. Like, I don't think Jim Schwartz has had like a legit, like 3-down, really good linebacker since Keith Bullock. So
yeah.
You know, I mean, it's one of those.
I wonder.
DeAndre Levy's pretty good.
Yeah. All right, cornerbacks. This was Rasul Douglas. I didn't even until I looked at the stats just before. He had 14 tackles.
Yeah, he's been racking up those tackles.
Some of those tackles are huge too.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you look at tackles and you say to yourself, "Well, that's not a good thing."
Yeah, it could be a bad thing a lot of the time.
He allowed one big pass.
It was mostly short yardage passes, though.
Right. He's a guy that's, again, you talk about improving as a tackler. I think Rasul Douglas is a starting cornerback on this team next year. I think you can trust him. I think Jim Schwartz has learned to praise him a little bit. Same with Peterson. Look, this team, we've talked about it before, this team's being put in a position where they have to find depth for the long term, and I think Rasul Douglas has kind of stepped up to the challenge. He's been really, really good the last 4 games. So if it's him and Jalen Mills with Cribon LeBlanc or Avonte Maddox inside, I think you feel kind of comfortable. People are going to say, no, we need to draft a cornerback. Sure. I think they should draft a cornerback at some point, but I don't think... Maybe the third round. Oh, wait. Never mind.
Oh, boy.
Man, I'm going to get so much hate in the comments, but I want it. I just think, like, Rasul's played very well. And Sidney Jones I have my concerns about, but Rasul's played well. Jalen Mills will come back. Trust me, he's going to be a starting cornerback next year because that's what Jim Schwartz likes. Let's talk about Cribon LeBlanc. So he had a scary moment where he got evaluated for a head injury, but before that he was making some really good plays and coverage. He's been kind of a really cool story over the last couple of weeks. Underrated college player, but didn't really do that well with the Bears, didn't do really all that well with the Lions. Comes here, he's finding his defense. He's exactly what Jim Schwartz wants in an.
His personality fits this locker room perfectly, too.
Absolutely. So the other guy, we brought him up earlier.
Avonte Maddox.
We have got to talk about Avonte
His first game back, too. Like, you and I had talked, I think on the preview pod, about how I was curious to see if they limited his snaps. I would be surprised if he didn't play every snap.
I mean, so he was targeted. Like, they went after him a couple of times.
Well, he started on the outside, by the way, which he had never done in the NFL.
Right.
He did that in college.
Yeah, he did.
But in NFL, he started as a slot corner, started at safety, went back to slot. He got injured for a few weeks. Then he played on the outside as like Malcolm Jenkins. Like Malcolm Jenkins loves him. There's like a video of him celebrating.
Yeah.
And like Malcolm's like, it's not like we're like sugarcoating it for him. Like we're throwing everything at him and he's handling it. Like that's the most even beyond his play. The most impressive part is that he's a rookie who they throw stuff at him and he handles it like it's nothing. Like he's for a 4th round pick, a guy who they weren't planning on playing much this year. I don't think. He's like one of the stories of the season for this team.
You know what's cool? It's cool when the secondary guys in the secondary know who you are, but when the defensive line's praising you the way he was praised after this game, Fletcher Cox goes, "He's a little guy. I like to give him a hard time, but he's got the heart of a giant." Like that's some pretty good praise from Chris Long praised him. I asked Doug Peterson during his press conference about him, and he said, he's able to play multiple roles. He trusts the coaching staff. I just think this guy is, you talk about having I think this is the lowest number of draft picks they had in several years this season. And you come away with Dallas Goedert and Avonte Maddox, and I think you feel pretty good about this draft class. Plus you got Josh Adams, an undrafted guy. Let's get to safety really quick. Corey Graham, you mentioned the interceptions. He's got 2 straight games of the new. He's played a lot better the last couple of weeks. Malcolm Jenkins, what more is it? I think he's the best strong safety in the league. Made some stops in there. Kicker.
Jake Elliott made a 50-something yarder, right? 51?
51. He looked great those first 3 quarters. I was so ready to praise him, and then he missed the one at the end. Luckily,
didn't wind up costing them, luckily, yeah.
We'll cap it on the chosen one.
That one punt he had was amazing.
He had 2 really good punts.
The inside the 5 one.
Yeah, he is. Look, he's found a consistency, and I think that's what's cool. But also, he's a physical presence, man. That guy. So in the fumble,
pile, yeah,
in the fumble that I guess Trey Sullivan.
Yeah, the punt return. We didn't mention that, but yeah.
Yeah, the last turnover of the game, special teams came up big. The returner fumbled it. His name escapes me. Doesn't really matter.
DJ Alexander recovered it. Special teams ace. Good stuff. Johnson goes to get into the pile, and I don't know who 53 is on the Rams, but Johnson was celebrating like harmless, but he was right in 53's face, and probably accidentally, and 53 shoved him, and then Johnston kind of went back into his face, and I go, wow. Because, I talked to his punting coach, and he said his toughness comes from the fact that he grew up knocking the crap out of other people. That Australian football is hardcore, and Johnson is hardcore. On that note, now we only have one redhead to talk about. If Carson's not in the lineup, we have to talk about Cam Johnston, right? Until they declare Wentz out for the season, he's going to be a looming topic, because if he can come back, then they'll probably put him back in the lineup. That's a topic for our next podcast. But, and then real quick, so the Saints and Panthers play on Monday night. If the Panthers win, then the Eagles are still in kind of perilous position, because then they don't have a tiebreaker with the Vikings or Panthers. The Vikings won on Sunday. The Eagles, the least they can do is go 1-1, and the other teams go 0-2. That would be the lowest, but the more likely they might have to win those last 2 games still to make it.
Yeah, and you feel good about this Texans game a little bit more now, because you saw the Jets played them pretty tight, and obviously the Eagles beat the second best team in the NFC West, in the NFC West champions 2 times.
2 times.
They already had the hats out at the airport. But yeah, so the Vikings play the Lions in Detroit next week, and then they play the Bears, who are going to be trying to hold on to that 3rd seed or possibly sneak into that 2nd seed. The Panthers play the Saints twice, and then they play, I think...
I'm blanking.
I'm blanking on who that...
It's somebody not that good.
Well, you didn't really limit. Who do they play?
Pulling it up right now.
Sorry, I know this isn't very interesting podcast stuff as we... Oh, so do you still think the Eagles go 7-9? They're 7-7 right now.
No, they'll probably go 8-8.
Okay.
I didn't have them winning the Rams game, so...
There you go. So we're changing minds here.
They're playing the Falcons. Is the other
Okay,
game.
they play the Falcons. I think the Falcons could potentially win that game too. They whooped the pants off.
Panthers don't look for.
Cardinals.
I mean, we'll find out what this Panthers team is tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't think this Panthers team is a threat. I think it's the Vikings, and that's pretty much it. The Panthers should have lost to the Eagles too. I mean, both of those.
The Vikings winning this week makes things a little tougher.
Yeah, and honestly, it looked like they were going to give that game away.
Yeah.
But I do think they lose to the Bears, and so if the Eagles can win out, then like best case scenario, right, is the Texans. I mean, the Lions beat the Vikings, and then you kind of know what you're
up against.
But then again, we return to 1:00 games next week. I am very excited about that because I don't know how many more of these late nights.
It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 o'clock.
3 a.m. East Coast time.
Yeah, so
got it right.
Yeah, we got some writing to do. Anyway,
read all our stuff in the morning. It'll be up by the time you wake up.
Yeah, we got some great stuff from Avonte Maddox. We got some great stuff from Chris Long. Great stuff on Nick Foles and Doug Peterson, and we're stoked about it.
We're stoked. All right, we'll end on that note. We'll have another podcast later this week. If something crazy happens, there will be an emergency one. You never know at this team, but probably not. But yeah, we'll have the preview. We'll have next week. They'll be back home. Big game against the Texans. Subscribe to the podcast. We're on all the major apps. Leave us a comment, and thanks for listening.